everyone, and welcome to Milwaukee's Tailgate Brewers podcast, part of the MKE Tailgate Network. This is episode 372. My name is James. I'm joined by Ryan and Paul, and this week we're going to continue our annual season preview series. Today we'll be focusing on all things hitting and defense after covering the pitching last week. But first, as always, how have you guys been? Paul, any bedtime issues with the time change?
Yeah, always. It's I mean, every parent knows this very, very well. It just wreaks havoc on everybody. It's not just kids. Like, adjusting to it is bad. I would keep this time forever. However, I will say that Jonathan Judge puts a spirited debate up as to why it actually is better for seasonal affective disorder all over to actually do the change, and it is more controversial than I thought. But man, it's super annoying. I wish we could have like a sliding scale. I know that would be hard with old timey clocks, but it's very, very, very annoying. So, also just to quickly toot my own horn, I'm in my platform tennis championship tomorrow on Tuesday.
Hell yeah!
So we ground through the playoffs like mad. I'm undefeated in the playoffs so far, and so wish me luck tomorrow. Should be a good time.
What is it?
Dang.
So platform tennis is basically like hipster pickleball. Is that the deal? Or it's more involved than pickleball?
Don't offend him. Don't offend him like that.
Not to be whatever. It's upscale and harder pickleball.
It's harder. I thought you said it was harder.
It's much harder than pickleball is. It just is.
Because you can play it off the wall, right?
That's right, yes. So the walls are in play. You know, the goal on pickleball is just to get everybody up to the net and then dink until somebody hits it high. Pickleball, by the way, is fun. This is not disparaging pickleball. It is an easy access game. It is a game that is good for anybody to play and that you can be expert in and also destroy people. But there's not a lot of movement in it. A lot of it's played at the net. And it is a more simple game. This is much more running. There's much more quick reaction time shots. There's a lot more back and forth. It's very, very fun. It's very well designed. So it is a blast if you ever have a chance to play it. It's great.
Yeah. So my weekend on Friday night, I went and saw a production at the Rep of Romeo and Juliet. And this was a thing I didn't even know until like that week that this was happening. I didn't know Romeo and Juliet was on our calendar for this year for the Rep tickets that we have. We have partial season tickets to that. And the best, so you know the one in the 90s that had Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes?
Yes.
And it was
the Baz Luhrmann one.
The Baz Luhrmann one, and it's set in like 1990s Miami, right? Like that's the setting
like
of it.
that, yeah. Guns instead of swords, yeah.
Yeah, and we saw one that the best. So we saw a production a few years ago of Much Ado About Nothing that was set in best I can describe as Melrose Place, and it was like the 90s, and they had like a grunge band, like a house grunge band that would play like interstitials, like in between stuff. You'd keep like the grunge band would like pound out some 90s stuff. The best way I can describe this was Romeo and Juliet set in Duck Dynasty.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
So actually,
like the backwoods of Alabama or something.
Yeah, and like so the music was pretty baller because it was all like not Zydeco, so it wasn't exactly Cajun. It was more like Southern blues. It was like set in like rural Alabama, Mississippi, like
so it's like Hatfields and McCoys instead of Romeo and Juliet. Yeah,
exactly. I think that's exactly what they were going for, and so you get a lot of good. So the interstitial music was like blues songs. And I'm like, okay. Right away, like off the bat, I'm like, okay. And then I'm reminded why I hate Romeo and Juliet, and I'm kind of sick of it. I'm kind of over it. I've been.
I think so. I agree with you. However, I think there is room for a good Romeo and Juliet because this is one of those things where, I think people don't take Shakespeare at his word enough when interpreting him in a modern audience, and that got turned into like a romantic love story at some point, and it's not supposed to be that.
No,
it is the opposite of that. These people are
stupid
teenagers,
and
a lot of modern people are like, well, teenagers used to date and stuff like that. And that is kind of true, but that is not universally true, and certainly in this circumstance. And these people are making bad decisions. Romeo gives this away early in like the first lines of the play when he is pining after someone who is not Juliet and just decides like, screw it. Now I've got a new love. Now I have a new love. Like that's my longest ever love. Like he's clearly fickle. He's clearly someone who is not ready to commit to long-term relationships where you should commit suicide. And if you run the play in that way, it works a lot better as a play than it does when you're treating it as like a romance for the ages, which is not what it's supposed to be.
Yes. Yeah. I grew up in the Madison area, and you may know that there is a fairly now sizable suburb of Madison named Verona. And I dated a
Of
girl
course.
from Verona. She was obsessed with
Epic.
Romeo and Juliet. I
Uh-huh.
think largely because it was set in fair Verona. It was a little bit creepy. Like, honestly, it was a little bit creepy. So, yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the Joss Whedon Much Ado About Nothing?
I have not. No.
Oh, it's
No.
really good. I know Joss Whedon's a jerk, but he made Much Ado About Nothing like on a weekend between directing Avengers films, and so everybody in it is like Avengers or Firefly or Buffy people, and
cool.
it's excellent. Like the dad is Agent Coulson, and the main male character is Wesley from Buffy and Angel, and it is full of those people. It's very well done. I would recommend it.
Yeah, I wanna watch some of the classic tragedies. I know Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy, but like some of the like Hamlet and Macbeth and Richard like I want to watch some of those now. Like that's where my head's at. Because I'm like, let's go that direction.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Don John in that is Simon from Firefly and Ricky Litton, the other one. The other Garfunkel and Oates, the blonde one, is in there as well. So. I was gonna say Ricky Lindholm, but that is correct. It's Kate. Kate is the other one. So yeah. Anyway, the cast is great. Go look at that.
Amazing.
And that does it for Shakespeare chat for the week.
Yep.
I was like, yeah, welcome to Milwaukee's Tailgate, where we break down the latest in local theater. We'll see you next. No, this is great. All right. Before we get started with the pitching preview, a reminder for those of you who aren't patrons yet, you can become one at patreon.com/MKE tailgate. $2 a month guarantees you get your questions answered both on this podcast and on reporting as eligible. $5 level gets you that question priority, plus the additional exclusive content, including the minor league extra with Ryan and Spencer, as well as reporting as eligible mini pods. Paul, we're going to go way too long, so I won't dwell on the Packers stuff. But hey, they signed some free agents.
They did, and they were all like meat and potatoes guys, which is totally fine. Like totally fine for agency. Yep. There's still the only fish left is Trey Hendrickson. If that happens, I'll probably record something. But it probably won't happen, so it doesn't matter.
Nope. Myles Garrett got paid. Not going to be a Packer.
Yep.
So good for him. All right. This episode was going to be mostly dedicated about the position players, as we said, but we do have to take care of some housekeeping up top here because there was some other news on the pitching side that we should talk about. So last week, if you didn't listen to our pitching preview, Paul noted that he'd really like to see at least one more guy added. And lo and behold, like one day later, the Brewers went out and signed Jose Quintana, which is like the monkey's paw curling for Paul. Didn't want Jose Quintana, but we got a pitcher anyway. So it'll be a 1-year deal, somewhere between the $5 to $7 million range, depending on the incentives. I think it's more like 5.5. $2 million of that is deferred. There's a mutual option for next year that's not going to get picked up for 15 or some crazy number. Mm-hmm. It's a 1-year deal, basically, with a buyout. So perfectly cromulent deal, I think. Obviously, Brewers fans know all about him after years of seeing him with the Cubs and other foes. He's not really that guy anymore, sort of settled into a groove, I think, as more of an innings eater and outpitching his peripherals kind of guy. So he is Brewersy in that sense and was with the Mets last year. So obviously, the Stearns brain trust effect there as well. Paul, real quick, how do you feel about Jose Quintana now pitching for the Brewers instead of against them?
It's totally fine. Like they needed somebody else to eat innings. They were thin in terms of guys who would go a lot of innings. Always worry about health, but that's any pitcher, so that's fine. They might even be able to tweak him a little bit and get a little more out of him, but he's honestly pretty effective as long as he's out there. So it's a totally fine signing. It is something that they needed to do. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing. He is just 2 years removed. Well, 2022, so I guess it'd be 3 years now removed from a 4-win season, like a legitimate 4-win season. But then in 2023, he only pitched 75 innings and was worth 1.5 WAR. Last year, he was back up to 170 innings, but worth only 1.0 Fangraphs WAR. That's because, like you were saying, James, the the
FIP's not
peripherals
great.
here, the FIP is not good. But he seems to have sort of settled into that. He does a good job getting balls on the ground. He last year hit a 3.75 ERA, and he had a home run to fly ball ratio 12.6%, which is considerably higher than his 10.3 career average. That could either be, just sign that things are catching up with him, or it might have been some bad luck. It's hard to tell with home run to fly ball ratio sometimes. So we'll have to see. He's not the stud ace that he was never really a stud ace, but he was a very good number 2 type in his heyday with the Cubs. But I think they can probably squeeze one more good season out of him. But the fact that he stayed on the market this long, Spencer and Jack we're talking about this. I can't remember which one said it, but basically he suggested the fact that he stayed on the market this long meant that there was a lot of skepticism out there from other teams. But if any team is set up to be able to take advantage of, what he can give them and help him outpitch his peripherals, the Brewers would be that team.
Yeah.
So it's fine. This is a very fine signing. Solid work.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to compare every lefty who outperforms his peripherals to Wade Miley, but he's basically Wade Miley. He's going to be 36. He's a lefty, doesn't throw hard at all. Will depend a lot on the defense behind him. He's Wade Miley. And, if he's your number 5 guy, you've got a pretty solid staff. So I'm happy with it too. It just adds at least some level of, dependent starts at the bottom of the rotation, which they kind of needed. And it sounds like he's only about a week behind in ramp up to the season, which, given early season off days and such, that Brewers probably won't need a number 5 starter for the first week or so. So it should all play out pretty fine. Also, after we recorded our pitching preview, the curse of the podcast causing an injury, Aaron Ashby joined DL Hall on the injured list. Although the second opinion on his oblique injury was a good one, and he's only expected to be shut down a couple of weeks before being stretched back out to start. I think initially we were looking at another potential 60-day situation. Suddenly makes a lot of sense to me why he couldn't really locate that breaking ball, because his side was killing him. So maybe it's assuring in that way. But Paul, sort of like DL Hall, hard to depend on Aaron Ashby being available as a starter. He keeps seemingly getting hurt with these injuries whenever he kind of pushes it to that level. Are you concerned about his ability as a starter?
Yes, I've been concerned about that for quite a while now, and it just doesn't really seem to work in terms of, just injuries, generally speaking. As soon as this happened, I feel like I read a tweet saying he's gonna recover and they're gonna try still starting him, but we'll see. I just don't think it's in the cards for him, and it's not in the cards for a lot of guys. Maybe he's just had a bad run and bad luck with injuries to this point, but most guys have reliever in their future, and I suspect he has reliever in his future too.
Yeah, I wonder kind of if this is a guy where you put him in the bullpen for a few years, and then sometime, he's 30 years old, you go, hey, about that starting thing, let's try that again. And all of a sudden, he has the second half of his career, I don't know, Seth Lugo or something. I could see something like that happening. I mean, that's a pretty close to a best case scenario, obviously, but I could see something along those lines. I just think in this short term here, he's probably a bullpen guy, especially until he can figure out how to command the breaking pitches, especially that curveball. Until you figure out how to command those pitches and reliably throw them for strikes, I don't know that he can start and turn over a lineup a few times. It's hard to imagine. So
it is.
Yeah. I do think we'll get more out of Ashby this year than we do out of Hall, though I think Hall probably will start down the road, come May, come the end of May, they probably will be looking for somebody to start because somebody's going to be hurt. So they'll probably be looking for somebody at that point. But Ashby seems more like a guy who could move his way into impacting via high leverage, whereas Hall's most likely impact is probably going to be if he can be, sort of a back end starter.
Right.
Yeah.
Hall was put on the 60-day IL also to make the 40-man spot for Quintana. So it'll be at least a couple of months, like Ryan said, before we see him in the majors. All right. Talking offense, we'll start in the infield. We'll go around the diamond in order here if you're scoring at home. So starting behind the dish at catcher, William Contreras is increasingly being considered one of, if not the best catcher in baseball when you factor in his offense with his improved defense in Milwaukee. But, obviously there was some slippage in his defensive metrics last year. Who's to say if it was, just a regression from his awesome first year or if he was just kind of wearing down because he was playing so much. He did say in the last week that he's open to taking more off days, which is great to hear. So we have that to look forward to. But Paul, I guess, are you concerned at all about his defense slipping even more, considering that's where a lot of his value has come from?
I am. And the reasons for this are that framing and catcher defense are really a young person's game. It's not like guys never remain good at them throughout their careers. Some guys do. Some guys are defensive specialists. But when your knees start to break down, when you start to tighten up a little bit more, it does often start to go away. And while he's not an old man by any stretch, he is certainly not. He is no longer young in baseball terms. This is going to be his age 27 season. This is what used to be your prime in the steroid era. It no longer is. He's on the downslope of his athletic part of his career. And the fact that he caught so much last year isn't good. Like, you actually need recovery time when you exercise. Catchers squat the whole game. This is not playing left field where you're jogging around for 95% of the time. Like, you're actually working at catcher. It was dumb last year to play both he and Adames as much as they did. Less dumb with Adames because he was probably going to be gone, but William Contreras is an asset, and they actually, I think, put themselves in a bad position by acquiescing to starting him at catcher as much as they did. And I'm worried about it. I still think he'll be fine for a while, but you have to start monitoring this now because he's at the part of his career where that defense could slide and not come back. Fortunately, the bat should still be fine, but it is a little worrisome that first setback has already set in.
Yeah, I mean, he took a big step forward the first year with Milwaukee. Like, obviously, he went from being a negative defensive catcher to being solidly above average. He was actually still solidly above average. I'm looking over at Baseball Prospectus's fielding metrics. He
wasn't bad by any.
He wasn't bad.
Yeah,
he was not. He still fell off what he had done the previous year.
Yeah, he was 7.5 positive CDA. So catcher defense added in 2023, 4.9 last year. If he can be even if it continues to slip, but is like 2 to 3 above average, I will happily take that considering what he offers on offense. And I think actually his numbers, his defensive numbers were down. It wasn't that he wore down throughout the year. His defensive numbers were actually started worse and I think got better as the season went on, if I'm remembering correctly. So I don't know how much it was that he wore down over the course of the season. I think it was just, he was out there so much like from the beginning of the season that it was just, that was putting extra strain and pressure on him. And so, yeah, I was super happy to hear that he does not want to play as much. Yeah. I think it gets a little bit tricky because we have so many guys we would like to, Yelich is going to need to DH because he has the bad back and we want to keep him out of the field. Hoskins is going to need to DH because he sucks as a fielder. Yeah. So that makes it harder to work in, 20, 30 games of, say, because like I think in an ideal world, I would be like, yeah, I would like William to catch 100 and maybe DH another 30. And then you get him in, for 130 games and he gets 30 games off. I think that would sort of be in the sweet spot, but it might be hard to get him those 30 DH games. I don't know. We'll have to see kind of how that plays off. These things have a way of sometimes working out, so I shouldn't worry about that. But he is a special hitter. And there's more in there too. If he can ever get that ground ball rate,
elevate it, man.
To elevate just a little bit more. And I know we've been talking about this with Yelich for years, and it's not that easy to do. But like even just a little bit, because he hits the ball so damn hard. If he could just elevate it a little bit more consistently, he really could have like a true MVP with the bat season. And not just necessarily like as a catcher. Like he could just have, that kind of like 160, 170 WRC plus type season if he could have a season where, the balls just were getting elevated a little bit more. So he could really have a special season that way. But yeah, it's great to have him on the team. And man, what a trade that was. I was watching them play a spring training game. Was it last weekend against the Athletics, and saw Esther Ruiz and was like, oh, right. That worked out great for us. So yeah.
Behind Contreras, obviously Gary Sanchez not with the team anymore. Eric Haas is back, though, and Jorge Alfaro was signed to a minor league deal. Whether or not he's just minor league filler or a camp catcher remains to be seen over the next few weeks, but probably not going to factor in there. Seems like Haas is the primary backup there. I'm not one to care much about backup catchers, but if we are giving Contreras more days off or at bats at DH, Paul, how do you feel about at least Eric Haas being first man up there?
I at least like that he showed a little something last year, and it's very outlier in small sample size. But I agree. The main thing is Contreras will play most games. You'll get that. But I do think we should pour one out and remember that Gary Sanchez is actually pretty important. And it would have been nice if they rested him a little bit last year, because they actually had a capable backup at catcher last year, at least offensively. I feel like Gary was decent enough defensively. And you might not have that this year. And it's not a huge deal, but it did allow you some flexibility that it may be a little bit harder to come by. But again, James, I agree with you. Like backup catchers, kind of whatever, as long as you can hold your own defensively and, pop in a Walker, step into one once in a while. That's really all I want out of you. And Eric Haas should be fine at that. So, no issues here. I think he's perfectly serviceable as a backup and won't be a star. Is not a guy in waiting. He's old, but he's fine. He'll be perfectly fine.
Yeah, he defensively is not strong. This is weird because it's the first time I can remember when they really had a subpar defensive catcher as their backup. Like, remember the years of Caratini being so good as a defender, even going back to like the Greg Zahn era, like way back when. Like
it's like George Kataris is like the last bad one I can remember. I don't know.
Yeah. And so it's not great, but I think he's capable back there, and it feels like he does a good job leading the staff and those sorts of things. So I'm not super worried about it from that perspective.
Yeah.
But
he's also new to the Brewers. He also could improve defensively.
Yeah, that's true.
That.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll
absolutely. He actually did improve a little bit, because if you look at what he did in 2023, he was worth negative 3.2 over 634 innings. Last year he was worth negative 0.4 over 151 innings. I guess that's barely improved, but it maybe a little bit. But yeah, he was. Thing is, if you can get, and I don't think this is likely, but I mean, he had 273, 304, 515 last year. Because,
he slugged the crap out of it.
Yeah, he was hitting the crap out of the ball when he would make contact with it. Yeah, I mean, if you could get something like, with the expanded amount of playing time, if you could get like a 90 WRC plus, they got a 125 out of him last year, which is why everybody fell in love with him.
Yeah.
But if you could even get a 90 out of him, I think you would consider yourself doing fine. If it's lower than that, then you're going to start looking about possibly to AAA.
Yeah, if you use him right too. So he's not a good contact guy, or he doesn't walk well, but he has normal platoon splits. Again, weird he's on the team. He actually, for his career, has slugged 485 against lefties. So, with some creative deployment here, I think you can eke a pretty good offensive profile out of him, as long as his bat doesn't start to completely fall off a cliff, which is also possible. But at least he does something. Like, there's a skill there.
Yep.
Yeah, he's kind of Gary Sanchez light in that way. He doesn't hit lefties the way Gary did, but not a bad one to have. All right, we're going to talk more bench options and prospects later, but since we're talking about catchers, Ryan, I need to bring up Jefferson Caro here. Pat Murphy absolutely seemingly loves him, according to Adam McKelvey. talked to him, I think today, as we record this on Monday night, that, Pat Murphy was saying if his arm is 70% of what it was before, we have a really good big leaguer on our hands. If it's 100%, he's like a perennial all-star. Seems to really love the way he, handles the staff, that kind of thing. But missing all of last year, do you think he kind of needs to just spend this entire year at AAA? We just kind of don't worry about him? Or if he performs well enough, do you see him coming up and taking some of those backup catcher ABs at the big league level?
Yeah, don't plan on him before July, but I mean, if he's
Sure.
hitting, if he's doing the things, and he's showing that he has, that like the shoulder is okay, and that he can throw, and that the defense and all that stuff, if all of those things are working, and he's hitting the ball better than Eric Haas, we get to July and he's looking like the better option, I would have no problem pulling the trigger at that point. I don't think it's a thing you want to rush, especially since I did just also hear that they're talking about the fact that he's going to start in AAA DHing. So they're not 100% comfortable with where he's at in terms of catching at this point, in terms of in games. So they think he's going to be ready to start the season, but at DH. So how quickly he starts to catch is a thing we're going to need to keep an eye on.
He also, I will point this out for everybody that it's true of. In his top 3 PECOTA comps, he has 2 Brewers, or 2 former Brewers, one or the other, and they are Gary Sanchez and Manny Margot.
Oh wow, that's
which is a
weird
wild combo.
comps.
Yes,
that's a weird comp. Yeah, 2 wildly different players. Okay, let's move to first base. When the Brewers signed Rhys Hoskins last winter, we were all super pumped about it. Having a good offensive threat at first base seemed, like a nice, pleasant change, even if his contract at the time meant either he'd be one and done with the good year or back on a bigger salary with the poor year. We know which of those ended up happening, but I guess, Paul, how are you feeling about his bat this year, another year removed from his knee surgery? He does seem to be hitting the ball consistently hard this spring, at least.
Okay, so normally I would be down on Rhys Hoskins, as I know I get criticized for being down on everybody by people who don't like the podcast. I'm not going to get burned by Rhys Hoskins here, though, because he's still on the team. And the thing that always happens to the Brewers is they bring in a guy who was hurt the year before, and he sucks, and then moves on to a different team with a year recovered from that injury, and he plays a lot better. And for Hoskins, they have that year signed up. So just regression to the mean and just having a year to actually get healthy. Plus, I do feel like before Rhys Hoskins maybe came back a little early from that injury, was actually hitting pretty well. I think he's going to bounce back and be okay. I actually think if he was a free agent and we were looking at all the not a Brewer before, and we were looking at all the first base potential free agents that were out there, we would have all been like, oh, Rhys Hoskins, he was hurt a lot of last year. He was down. We might be able to get him at a deal. He's a good guy to have for a bounce back. Sucks at defense, yes. But I think he'll actually be all right. PECOTA agrees with that, by the way. They like him as the best power guy on the team this year, and to have a halfway decent offensive profile. And there's a lot of reasons to think that's true. Like guys do bounce back the second year after injury. Guys aren't just bad consistently year. Guys go up and down. He'll probably be quite a bit better and surprise some people. And I actually think that'll probably happen.
Yep. Call it the Jesse Winker year after the year after.
Exactly.
Yeah. The Jesse Winker corollary. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I agree up and down. I think that he is probably due to have a better year than he did last year, just because it would be kind of early for him to decline. And for what it is worth, people are saying he's moving better. He seems to be moving better in camp this year than he did last year. So people see that he looks a little bit more spry and he's moving better. And a 1649 OPS is never going to make me feel bad. Though what really makes me happy is the 5-4 walk to strikeout ratio. He's walked 5 times and only struck out 4 times. That has also got my attention. So fairly happy about that.
I feel like that's something we didn't see a ton of from him last year, was that patience. I mean, it was a calling card of his for a good portion of his time in Philadelphia, but I don't know if it was just, the year off rust, your swing decisions are probably going to be off after that much time away.
The thing was, his walk rate last year was 10.3, and his last year in Philly, it was 10.7. So he was walking just about as much. The big problem was he wasn't getting hits. So that was his 303 on base percentage was bad because the batting average was 214 as opposed to, the 240s, which is where he had tended to live in Philly. That was the big thing that dragged him down. But yeah, if he could find a few more holes in the defense, that would be also nice, as well as just, really the thing is we need him to slug. And honestly, he did hit 26 home runs last year. So the fact of the matter was he was actually hitting for power and doing those sorts of things. It was just everything else was kind of crappy, and it dragged that down.
Yeah, and I think the talk about him having his legs back underneath him too, that can further help the power as well. I'm not going to say he's going to hit 40 home runs, but if you feel better and more balanced with your swing, you're not just, using your arms entirely to hit 26 home runs, maybe there's some room for improvement there, which they're going to need because middle infield production is going to be a big question heading into this year. We're going to lump both middle infield spots, second base and shortstop, together because to this point, the Brewers are still telling everyone, whether or not we believe them is a different thing, but they're still telling everyone that they haven't decided who between Joey Ortiz and Bryce Turang will man shortstop most of the time. Bryce Turang did on Monday and made some spectacular plays, Ryan, as you're shaking your head. But yeah, I think we all agree here that the optimal alignment would be Bryce still at second base and Joey Ortiz at short, but we'll see how that plays out. Mm-hmm. But, talking about Rhys Hoskins maybe hitting for more power, they're going to need to find that elsewhere because they just failed to replace the offense lost by Willy Adames' departure. I think we can confidently say that was an offseason failure at this point. But I don't know if anyone will argue the defense should at least be much better at short, regardless of who ends up there, especially considering how Willie fell off the last couple of years in Milwaukee. So I guess, Paul, I know how Ryan feels. What's your preferred position for Turang and Ortiz? Is it kind of chalk, just second base for Turang?
So I will say I don't think it matters a ton, but I would stay with the incumbent with Turang over at second base. I think he's very helpful over there. And Ortiz, I would move to short. We've seen at least one of those two there. It seems to work pretty well. I think Ortiz can manage just fine. And I wouldn't mess with that personally. If they had gone out and got like an offense first, second baseman, then sure, I would entertain a lot of this or third base, whatever. They didn't do any of that though. They can do whatever they want. And Turang is amazing at second base. So just do that. Just lean into that. But again, this is really nitpicky. They can both play the middle infield positions at elite levels. It probably doesn't matter that much.
Yeah, I think it probably matters more than I think it matters more than you think it matters, especially just because I think Ortiz has the ability to be truly plus. Maybe not plus, like Adames was at his best with the Brewers. He was like a 65 approaching 70 defender where he just did everything really, really well. And Turang just doesn't have the arm to be able to do that. Yeah, he has the hands. He probably has the range.
I think he's definitely got the range.
But the jump throws, Brian.
Yeah,
he made
but
jump throws.
He doesn't have a big time shortstop
because he doesn't
arm,
have an arm,
and that's the way that Adames had a hose. The great shortstops have really good arms. They do, and he doesn't have that. So I think that the other thing is Turang is an exceptional second baseman. Was one of the best defenders at any position in baseball as a second baseman.
The main reason I wouldn't move him is that. You have that, so don't mess with that.
And it's an important thing to sort of understand that that's a big deal. I think it was either Sophia or Lever and Grindle. Somebody on the broadcast today was literally talking about this. It was like one of the important things was when they got rid of the shifting and said, okay, we're getting rid of shifting, it turned second base from a position where you could sort of cover up poor defense by just positioning and moving people around and whatever. You could sort of cover things up at that position. Now it's back to being a really important defensive position again, and Turang is exceptional at it, so just don't mess with that. Just let him go, let it go. It's fine. He can do that. And I think Ortiz can be not as good as Turang is at second base at shortstop, but I think he's a better shortstop than Turang is. So don't take the downgrade at 2 positions, basically. Just take the downgrade at shortstop, or, whatever the theoretical, leave your best guy in place at second base and then go with Ortiz and figure it out from there. That just makes by far the most sense to me. And also because third base, I think we have a pretty good defender at third base who's probably going to be getting the lion's share of the reps over at third base, at least to start the season. I think that is by far your best defensive alignment that you can put out there is Turang, Ortiz, Dunn. That is the best defensive alignment you have. So just roll with that. Just do that.
Yeah. I think it's easy for Brewers fans to forget, too, that third base was almost completely new to Joey Ortiz last year. I heard it mentioned on the Sunday broadcast. It was the Royals broadcast team, but still, they noted that before he came to the Brewers, he played all of 40 games in his entire professional career at third base. He's a shortstop by trade. That's his home position. So as good as he was at third base last year, I think that's all the more reason to expect he'll be exceptional at shortstop. All right, you mentioned Ali Dunn there, and before we get to third base, I kind of want to expand just the infield discussion overall, because Ali does have some versatility there, some potential to play second base. Caleb Durbin obviously has been playing both second and third. So I guess, Ryan, how possible is it that we just kind of see the Brewers kind of mix and match all 3 positions? Obviously, they might have their default that you mentioned with Dunn at third, but I mean, it's really nice that almost all of these guys can bump over to second too, if Ortiz or Turang needs a day off.
Yeah, I think Durbin is your second choice at second base and your second choice at third base, and possibly, I think he's going to play just about every day against left-handed pitching. I don't know whether that's going to be to give, probably more to give Dunn a break than it is to give Turang a break. Probably, but that could change as the season goes on too. If Turang's offense regresses back to 2023 levels, which I'm not expecting, but is definitely a possibility that we have to consider, then Durbin could be the guy to step into the breach there and step up and do that. I think that Turang, though, is the backup shortstop. Durbin is the backup shortstop. Arm-wise, he also does not have a hose, though apparently not terrible at third base. Spencer's kind of convinced me a little bit on that he could do some stuff at third base that makes it a little bit more playable, as opposed to shortstop where the throws tend to be a little bit longer. So throwing from the hole, I don't think that would be a thing he would be able to do very well. Whereas as a third baseman, charging in on balls, throwing across the diamond, it's a little bit shorter of a throw. So
Do we talk about Kurt's piece on Ollie taking the ball too far in the zone yet? Did that happen on the show?
We haven't gotten there yet because we haven't gotten to the corner yet.
I want to bring it up.
True. Okay.
Right now.
We're still on shortstop. Okay. Yeah.
We were. Yes. Yeah, let's do it right now. So we spent most of the offseason assuming Ortiz would move over to short, right? And that would create a hole at third base. We also spent most of the offseason, Paul actually did, lamenting about how the external options to fill third base weren't great and how almost all of them were Brewers guys already. So ultimately, as of now, it looks like the Brewers made the same assessment and went ahead with plans to either try to solve it internally with Ali Dunn or hope Caleb Durbin can hit enough to play there. We have a Patreon question, but first let's talk about Kurt's piece because it was super interesting in the last week in the Journal Sentinel. If you haven't seen it already, go and look it up. He wrote extensively about why the Brewers are optimistic that Ali Dunn is better equipped to take advantage of his exceptional bat speed and exit velocity numbers. But it's great that they identified that he was getting to the ball too deep in the zone. But to me, Paul, knowing that's the problem and doing something about it are two different things. And that kind of is what decides whether or not you're a big leaguer. I guess what's your take?
So it's nice that they have that identified and that they have figured out that matters. And that's great. But there is the fundamental problem of fixing this with Oliver Dunn. That being, that he already strikes out a decent amount. And if you're attacking balls sooner to get them in the front of the plate, that's going to cost you some time that you have to make decisions. And that maybe not, but probably will lead to more swings and misses. And so there's a trade-off here too. It might be worth making, and it probably is worth trying, because it's not like Oliver Dunn's bat's keeping him around the big leagues at this point. But I think some skepticism is warranted. But it's nice that they've actually identified it in the first place, because at least it gives them something to work with.
Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic, more like kind of waiting and seeing, but with a more open mind, where I'm not as fatalistic about what is going to happen with Oliver Dunn as I was. I'm kind of interested and intrigued about what the possibilities are here, because they seem to, not only do they identify it, but they seem to have like a plan in place to fix it, and there seems to be, they're happy with some of the results. Now, a lot of that could just be spring training eyewash crap, basically the nouveau version of best shape of his life, best analytic shape of his life or whatever. I don't even know. But basically it could kind of be that stuff, because you hear that stuff all the time. So you have to be discerning. We've been through so many spring trainings. We're old people now, and like we've been through so many spring trainings where we've heard all the, well, this guy's gonna fix this thing. And the thing is, it is sometimes true. Sometimes guys actually did sort of take a step forward and figure something out.
Yeah.
But the hit to miss ratio on that is pretty bad. So I really want to just kind of focus on the fact that if he can at least be a playable bat, I think the defense is well above average at third base. He's a good defender at third base. And so that at least gives you something to work with, and buys him some time to see if he can figure something out with the bat. I was joking with you guys in the group chat about the idea of, like, at some point he's going to get ungodly hot for 6 weeks in the first half, and it's going to be just enough to convince all of us that, like, oh, he's figured it out. And then basically from that point forward, he'll have begun a slide, and then after the trade deadline, we're going to be going, should we have upgraded at third base, because Dunn hasn't hit in like 2 months. You just sort of see this kind of thing playing out. It's very common with players. Oliver Dunn, he's in that age. What is he, 27, 28? Like, he's right in that age.
Or 28 now,
yeah, where guys often have that like breakout season where it's like, oh, look at that, he's good. And James, you mentioned the name.
We're in Casey McGee territory,
Yeah, like you're hoping to get a Casey McGee season. And like, you know what? It actually did really work. Like, they got a good season out of Casey McGee.
They did.
They just stuck with it a little bit too long. So, and before we go on, I did want to bring up one thing, because I think one thing we really should be paying attention to, Joey Ortiz's power is going to be very, very, very important to watch. He seems like the rare Brewer who might actually get non-home run extra base hits, and that's harder to do in Miller Park or in AmFam Field than it is at a lot of places.
Very much so.
But it seems like it might be part of his thing. So I'm intrigued, and really, I think a lot of how well this offense does specifically, which is going to be a big part of how well this team does, is going to come down to what kind of offensive production do they get out of Turang and Ortiz up the middle, because I think those are the up the middle guys, because they're the good defenders. And if they can get solid to good offense out of them, I think it drastically raises the ceiling on the team. Whereas if they don't, they might be kind of stuck with them because they're the defenders that they need to make the pitching thing work. And without that, they might have nothing. So they might end up becoming holes in the bottom of the lineup. So a big part of this season is going to rise and fall on the offensive abilities of Bryce Turang and Joey Ortiz. It's just, they're really, really important to what this offense is going to be.
Agreed. Before we move off of Oliver, really, really quick, I did want to mention, normally this kind of thing I would just dismiss as garbage and not trust it at all. But I think it's worth noting Kurt's done a couple of these pieces. And the previous one that sticks with me is on Garrett Mitchell. We'll get to him later. But some of their advanced hitting development seems to be yielding good results in untraditional ways with him. And that gives me more credence that Dunn might be able to pull this off. The other thing with Dunn is, in the minors, when he's been there as an old man, but still, he has shown the ability to turn his bat speed into better offensive production. So it's there if they can speed him up a little bit. It's not like it's not like they're working from scratch here. Like against lower level competition, he has occasionally been able to do something better. And so there's at least a couple reasons to believe it might be real. Although, cautiously optimistic is the best at this point.
Yeah, there's unquestionably some tools there. It's a question of actualizing them, and that's the hard part.
Yeah.
Fun part of spring training now this year is at least some parks have some StatCast ability. So these are like partial numbers, but Joey Ortiz 5th fastest bat speed this spring on the Brewers. Ortiz 2nd at 77.3 miles an hour. Yes.
Isn't that good?
Ollie's 5th. Is 5th. Above him, you've got Ernesto Martinez, number 1, but that's very limited sample size in terms of looking at which parks he's played in. Jared Oliva is 3rd, and then Eric Haas is 4th. So some names that we've talked about. Good to see at least the high bat speed guys with some of the wild card factors here.
Yes.
All right. Michael Parr on Patreon has our first Patreon question this week. Talking about third base. So he's asking, since you're recording this on Monday, that means the Brewers will acquire a third baseman on Tuesday, right? Hey, if it worked for Jose Quintana, who's to say? Related, Vinny Capra has no options. So one of Dunn, Durbin, or Monasterio has to be optioned, correct? Who goes and why? I think, Paul, looking at that list, there's an obvious name, but what do you think?
I'm bad at options, so I don't know who has them at any given moment. I rely on you guys to tell me.
Monasterio and Durbin.
Monasterio's gonna go.
Monasterio is the one I would say doesn't fit. So, so him.
Yeah, Monasterio.
He's just a guy.
He is apparently also like he has the Hernan Perez like clubhouse presence. Everybody loves him. Dude's gonna be a coach, maybe a manager down the road. Like he's going to be a baseball lifer because he is just really, really respected by his teammates and by everybody. But at a certain point, the playing ends and then the coaching begins. And he's not a great player and not a great defender.
He's not.
The other thing is like he's not a great defender really anywhere. So he could play a bunch of positions, but he can't really play them well. So that's also a problem. If he wasn't a great clubhouse guy, I doubt he would still be in the organization.
Agreed. He has garbage versatility. Yeah. He can play everything in the same way I can play everything.
Technically a third baseman.
I'm not any worse at any of the positions. That's
no. You're a platform tennis champion to be. So, you've got some athleticism there. Ryan, do we need to talk about Vinny Capra? Because obviously he's out of options. He's hitting the crap out of the ball in the spring, but is he a thing?
He's not a thing, but he's a guy that I think is going to open on the 26-man roster. I don't think there's much of a question of that. I think you might as well. It's one of those things where you don't tend to make it. People think that like camp should be open competition. I've lectured against this for a decade now. That's not how it actually works. Yeah. But like Vinny Capra's been good enough and he was proximate enough and has put in his time in the organization. And like, you need somebody who's capable of playing second base, third base, shortstop as a backup on the roster. And like, he can. So yeah, let him go do that. I think that's pretty likely that he's going to do it, though. It's gonna squeeze some other guys out. It makes some other decisions more difficult. But yeah, I think he makes it.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get an Owen Miller April out of him, you take it and say thanks and enjoy them. Go on. Yeah,
exactly. That's seriously that we could scoff, but like there is something to that where you'll ride a streak, you'll ride a hot hand, and then you're not going to be particularly sentimental about letting him go. It's fine.
Fair.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move to the outfield. Obviously, all eyes will be on Christian Yelich as he works his way back from that back surgery. The Brewers kept him out of spring games until the calendar turned to March, and he's already homered twice, although neither were pulled, Paul. So they don't count. Yep.
Okay, hold on. That one that he hit to dead
the
center
batter's eye.
field over the batter's eye was basically to dead center. It was just slightly.
It was left.
No, I'm sorry, dead center does
Center.
not count. This is official ruling
No.
of the podcast. Because here's dead center is a different swing than in pulling the ball is. You all know it when you see it. That's it's not pulling it. It is hitting it to dead center. It flies off like the middle of the bat. It goes very far straight. It is not the same thing. It does not count.
But he did hit the holy bejesus out of that baseball.
He
It
did,
was
but all of his dead centers,
crushed.
even in the bad times, were always like super crushed to center. He
Yeah,
always had
halfway
power
up the
there.
scoreboard. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Anyway, I think we all expect to see a lot of DH time for him, at least early on. So I think we kind of briefly touched on this earlier. How do you balance trying to keep him healthy with DH at bats when you risk putting yourself in danger by playing Rhys Hoskins in the field, Paul? How do you play that early on?
I think Yelich is basically on a schedule of DHing, and they'll just probably have it worked out where he gets regular rest, unless if stuff gets tweaked, they will go to that. But they'll probably have him on essentially a pitch count / game count per week, and they'll have this rotation all figured out, and they'll have to make some sacrifices defensively. That's just how it's going to be. Like when Hoskins is going to have to play in the field. Everybody's going to play in the field at some point. It's just how it is, and so they will suffer a little bit in left field / at first base when that happens. But these things, as we always say, tend to work themselves out with injuries and with playing time, and this one will too. The other thing with Yelich is you want to keep him healthy. You don't want to expose him in the field, but I still don't think it's the field that really hurts Christian Yelich. I still think it's the bat. Bat's bad for backs. It's not good to you're tall, running hurts your back too, but really the twisting is the thing. So that might get him in the field a little more than people think, in my opinion, but could be wrong. But he's an old guy with a bad back, so they'll balance it as best they can. And the timing will work out just fine. It really, I don't think it'll be that hard to find time for everybody. It's never as hard as you think it's going to be. I am plussed by his number one Pacoda comp being Tim Raines for some reason.
Hell yeah.
Fast, athletic, not hurt person. So that's good. I'll take that. And of course, Christian Yelich's second comp has been for the last, I believe, 8 years now, and will always be Carl Yastrzemski. So as long as that keeps going, we can still be optimistic.
Yeah. So I did hear something that was mentioned on the broadcast again today on Monday afternoon, where they were talking about the fact that he plans on running. He is saying that he plans on stealing some bases.
Hell
so
yeah.
He's fast.
30-30, 40-40.
That,
what do you think?
Well, but that is more of an indication of how he feels physically to me than anything else.
Absolutely.
We need to see it. We have to see it first before we totally buy in, because he can say whatever he wants. The proof will be in the running, right? We need to see it. But
everybody feels great on May 10th or March 10th. Yeah.
Yeah, in an ideal world, we sort of get to the point where Yelich down the stretch, maybe, and God willing, in October, is back in left field, and Hoskins is the guy who's playing DH, and we've moved away from him having to be over at first base. That in a ideal world would be great. But I think early on, especially, we need to see a lot of time. Yelich is going to need to see DH time, because we're just trying to ease him in and not put as much stress on the back. Trying to take as much stress off the back as possible. We'll get the most out of him possible. So it's a balancing act. It's a game. But we talked about that last year too, that in an ideal world, you would get to the point where Hoskins was pushed more to DH, but early on, that wasn't necessarily going to be possible. Same deal this year.
Garrett Mitchell remains an enigma. Jonathan Judge's least favorite player. We've talked about how Kurt and others identified the paradox of Mitchell having really good swing decisions, but still striking out a ton. So I guess he figures to be really important to me, Paul. How much, I guess, does this offense, A, just need him to be healthy for most of the year, and B, take a step forward to replace some of that lost power production?
I think I just want to see health out of Garrett Mitchell. The floor is so high. I mean, they have a ton of good outfielders. So the floor would be higher if he was on a different team, actually, because the replacement for Garrett Mitchell once Blake Perkins is healthy anyway is awesome. And even then, it's Self Relic, who's also awesome on defense. but generally speaking, he is great at defense. And so as long as he's healthy and hits for some kind of power or just contributes in the Turang way of speed, that's a good player. And there's still power upside for him. Well, maybe not upside. We might be at the power upside for him, but for him, it's all about availability and just keeping his strikeouts under at slash under what they are now. By the way, he is their weird high WAR projection that has no Pacoda comps. He broke the system. The Brewers, I do think the Brewers lead baseball in guys who broke Pacoda's comparison engine. Because
we talked last week, there were a couple pitchers too, right?
At least there was the one. They have the only non-Japanese pitcher, I think, to not have Pacoda comps, and I think Garrett Mitchell's the highest WAR guy that doesn't have them too. Trying to look real quick, so he is a weird, unique player, and I do think he is kind of the difference between like they need Ortiz and Turang to be goodish to have, I think, an averagey type offensive like what they had last year. To be any good, they need Garrett Mitchell to be healthy and pretty decent, because there's not a lot of additional power upside on the team that we didn't already know was there.
Yeah, so I was going to put a finer point on this. On Rates and Barrels with DVR, shouts DVR if you're listening, and, where they have a thing they talk about, which is the rule of 5, which is teams kind of have to have like 5 dedicated everyday players who like a lineup is built around. Do you have 5 or do you not have 5? And if you can get to 5, your offense is probably going to be pretty okay. If you're struggling to get to 5, you're probably going to have problems. So this is a concept they talk about all the time. And Garrett Mitchell is quite literally our swingman as to can we get to 5?
Number 5.
He is. I think he's going to hit more 4, but that's because just the way the lineup is going to work with William hitting 3rd. They're going to want Mitchell and then Hoskins hitting 5th, like just to keep the lefty righty lefty thing going. Because it does look like Chourio is going to be hitting leadoff and then Yelich second. Like that seems to be the way they're going for most days. So Mitchell is the swing guy. If he can actually be that solid, 20% better than big league average hitter, this has the potential to be a damn good offense. Whereas if he's not, and some other things go wrong, our worst fears about this offense can pretty quickly be realized.
Yeah, easily come true.
Right. So like there is a lot of this is really riding on Garrett Mitchell, and they seem to have an idea and seem to have plans, and he has been unquestionably productive, but he just hasn't played that much. We're talking about less than 350 plate appearances over 3 seasons at this point. Like he just isn't on the field enough. So yeah, the potential is there. Very excited to see what he can potentially do over a full season.
Yep.
And also a fantastic defender, like a great, legitimately might be, he's not Blake Perkins in center field just because Blake is so exceptional, but Mitchell has the range that Perkins has and has like he has a huge hose out there too. Like he has definitely tools to do that. Can be a great all around player, but just, we haven't seen him stay healthy. If he can do that, I think there's a real chance there. But we also might see finally the exposure of his high strikeout rate, making pitchers figuring out, we can work around this guy and he's not going to hurt us. So it can go a lot of different ways with Garrett Mitchell. He is the swingiest of swingmen for what this offense is going to be.
You're not kidding, because pull up the most recent Pacoda projections. Look at the Brewers. He is literally 5th in WARP projection. Well, tied for 5th with Mark Canha. It's William Contreras at 3.7 WARP, Jackson Chourio 2.6, Christian Yelich 2.6, Joey Ortiz 1.8, Garrett Mitchell and Mark Canha 1.7. So, and you look at the names below that, and the offensive abilities drop off in a hurry. You're talking free like Turang, Rhys Hoskins. So yeah, he is pretty pivotal here. I'm going to be really interested to see if he can hold up. because even last year, he missed a good chunk of the year, and it still ended up being the most games he's ever played in a full season. So, that's been an issue, and that'll be a thing to maybe manage going forward also. All right. Outside of Christian Yelich, I think you could maybe argue that Jackson Chourio is the single most important player the Brewers have when it comes to surpassing the projections and expectations for their offense this year. Obviously, his second half last year was special, but I think it's fair to wonder. He's only 20, turning 21. Can we count on that over a full year? Or, Paul, do you kind of suspect a sophomore slump might be coming?
Nah, I'm all in on him. He
Love it.
I like it when guys live up to expectations. Those expectations are there for a reason, and it's just sometimes people don't live up to lofty expectations, and we're like, he's young, he'll still develop, blah blah blah. No, he did. Slow start is fine, but we know the deal with Jackson Chourio, which is he moves up a level, he struggles for like 2 months, and then he beats the crap out of everybody, and then he gets promoted, and then he does that again. We're out of levels. He's been promoted. He already did that. He's going to be fine. I think he will probably exceed his. I would actually bet a decent chunk of money he will exceed his PECOTA projections, because PECOTA doesn't do well with outliers like Jackson Chourio.
Yeah.
It is a compact projection system, as all of them are. That's just how statistics works, and I think he will be not sophomore slump and be like the best player on the team. So my expectations for him this year are to be the best player on the team.
Yeah, either Levering or Grindle, I can never tell the difference, made that exact point, like almost word for word, Paul. They were like, he got to the major leagues and now he's out of levels. So now it's just like, well, can he ascend to the superstar level? Like that is the next step. And I feel pretty good about that. 3 walks, 2 strikeouts this spring. That does have me smiling. That 2 strikeouts, especially, really, I'm like, okay, you could see last year him learning in May, even when he was still struggling. In May, you could see him being like, you literally watch it, like his at bats and go like, oh, okay, I got that. Okay.
Nodding and talking to himself in the middle of the
You're not going to get me on that again.
Awesome.
Yeah. Like just the growth that we saw for it's special players work on their own timelines and do their own thing. Sure, a sophomore slump is possible. The league catching up to him in some way, possible. But the other thing that we should talk about a little bit is he's played a significant amount of center field this spring.
Interesting.
We will see if that is a way for them to. It would help. It would be useful if he could be a legitimately good defender in center field. It would give them some flexibility, especially before Perkins comes back.
Yeah, especially if Mitchell goes down early too. You're going to have to play somebody there, and I think maybe you'd prefer to have him in center than, well, Sal's excellent in center also, but if Yelich needs to play the field, you keep Chourio in center. That seems like a great idea. Speaking of Sal, he's this year's best shape of his life guy.
Yeah.
Allegedly adding 20 pounds of muscle.
Pounds of muscle.
Ugh,
Italian beef, baby. Italian beef.
Yeah. Doesn't frequently happen that quickly. But, I don't know if we've seen that translate into any tangible power results quite yet. I know he's hitting well in spring, but everybody hits well in spring. His defense obviously was what kept him in the lineup last year, but by the end of the year, the combination of him and Terang in the lineup made for 2 pretty big black holes. So I guess, Paul, what does he need to do this year for you to think he's a long-term piece for the Brewers and not just kind of, a defensive specialist you tolerate in the lineup?
So I don't think he needs to hit great. And that's my main frustration with Sal Frelick last year. And as we mentioned a zillion times, his 1% exit velocity. Because he is a great athlete and he's fast and he's a plus defender everywhere in the outfield. He can steal bases like seemingly every Brewer can. He just needs to mix in a few more doubles and knock a few over. That's really it. All I want out of he's fast.
Hit a gap, man. Yeah.
You don't need to hit a zillion singles. And I know that he didn't hit but he hit 22 doubles last year. Most of those were speed. That's fine. Speed doubles are fine, but you can do better than this. Also, hit more than 4 triples. I know triples are weird, but you should approach double-digit home runs if you're Sal Frelick. You're playing in right field. You added 20 pounds of beef. Like, you don't have to hit 20, but, push 10. Get me to 8. Get me to 9. If you do that, you will suddenly be like a 3-WAR player. So do that. That's all I want out of you. I don't need more. You're a little tiny guy. That's fine. But that is all I need out of Sal Frelick. And he should make those changes, because last year was kind of embarrassing with the bat, just in terms of his raw power was ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and there is some good indication. He hit a ball it would have been his second hardest hit ball all last year. I think over this weekend, in one of the games this weekend, it would have been his second hardest hit ball, behind the home run that he hit in Game 3. And so, yeah, I think he is going to hit the ball harder, and I think that is going to come along. I'm actually going to cut against the grain a little bit here and say that actually the biggest thing that I would like to see improve on him this year is, in 2023, he had a 12.6 walk rate and a 16.6 K rate. So both exceptionally good numbers, right? Like, when you're in double digits for walks, you're doing really well, and a strikeout rate in the mid-teens, that's exceptional. He actually improved his strikeout rate to 14.9% in 2024, and his walk rate dropped to 7.4%. I want that walk rate back up, because if he can get that walk rate back up and some of these additional, like hitting the ball harder around the field, I think that potentially opens him up to become a legitimate leadoff hitter, because if he could start getting on base at, say, a 340, he had a 340 on base percentage in 2023. Mm-hmm. If he can get on base at like a 350 clip, I'm really not going to worry about them being potentially wanting to get Terang back to the top of the lineup at any point. And that can he could stay down at the bottom, which is where he belongs. And then you could potentially move Chourio down to the 2-hole, and the power can become more of a power hitting position. You want your best hitter hitting in the 2-hole. So Frelick becoming a true leadoff hitter this year, not in the mold of Ricky Henderson, because he's never going to hit for that kind of power. Ricky was hitting like 20 plus home runs. It's not that
25 home runs. No. Yeah,
but more power than he had, and just hitting the ball harder on a more consistent basis. That is what I want to see. So really, focus on that walk rate. I want to see that walk rate go up.
I mean, I didn't realize until I just looked, but he's averaging like 94 miles an hour for exit velocity this spring, which is an improvement. Obviously, the launch angle never going to be huge with him, 10 degrees. But, at least if you can at least hit a grounder 95 miles an hour, at least they'll sneak through. Like you were saying, Paul, enough of the dink and dunk, just trying to float it over the second baseman's head. Just hit a gap. You have a better chance of hitting a gap when you hit it that hard.
So you said his average exit velocity was what this spring, James?
I think it's 94, but I may have screwed up the StatCast search. Spring training stats are weird on this.
They are weird on this.
And you're not getting a complete picture, because not all of the parks,
exactly.
I don't think Maryvale had.
Correct.
Yeah. But
correct.
His average exit velocity last year, just for context, for people that aren't as fluid in this stuff, his average exit velocity, which was first percentile last year, was 83.4.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about a 10 percentage point jump year over year, if that's what this really is, that is grab your attention stuff. Oh yeah, that's Beyonce. That's really big stuff. So hopefully that's all. Hopefully we're correct on that. But
again, grains of salt for both spring training stats and partial sample, because not every spring park has this data, but that's at least encouraging to see it's out there. Again, we'll see how he holds up over the year too, because it's entirely possible. As he mentioned, he lost a ton of weight as the season went on, finished the year at like 167, which is just tiny. So we'll see how he can keep it up too, but that's definitely worth following. Real quick, we mentioned Blake Perkins will miss a good chunk of the year on the IL, fractured his shin on a foul ball. So Manny Margot and others will try to step in to his Swiss Army knife outfield role. Wanted to ask Paul if there were any worries about the outfield depth, considering Mitchell's history, but Jackson Chourio playing center field passively well would alleviate a lot of those concerns for me. How about you?
I'm not too worried about it, especially early on. You can always do some in and out shuffling if you need to from down south, and you can put Mark Hanna out there for a cup of coffee every once in a while. Though I think he's mostly going to not do that. DH first base, but
DH first base,
they have of all the places that this team has depth, they just have a ton of outfield depth. They can withstand a lot of harm to the outfield before they really start to feel it, and they'll be fine for the first month of the season unless Mitchell goes down or Yelich's back acts up, and then it'll get taxed. But even then, one of those they can withstand. Okay, two of them it starts to push, but they're okay there. Honestly, if outfield depth starts to hurt them at all, it is guys getting hurt who they're going to need to contend anyway. And it's a bigger problem than just depth at that point. That's Yelich and Mitchell both missing time. And if those two miss too much time, this is all for naught anyway.
Yep, I would agree with that. Jake Bauers is another guy.
I forget about Jake. He can stand out there.
Yep, Jake can also take a glove and go stand out there. And hell, maybe even Tyler Black, but more on that in a minute.
All right, just some real quick points about bench and prospects. Mark Canha, late addition, but also I think we see as a solid add for sure, just to add a level of on-baseness and just another passable bat to throw in there. Is he a lock, do you guys think, to make the roster as a right-handed first base outfielder to kind of help balance things out a bit? And we mentioned Jake Bauers. Does he make the opening day roster? Or does he have to wait in AAA?
Yeah, I think Bauers needs to wait. Canha is virtually a lock because, as Spencer and Jack pointed out on their podcast last week, at this point, it looks like the Brewers are probably going to see 7 lefties out of 10 to start the season.
Woo. Yep.
A lot of lefties early on. Canha is a guy you're going to want on the roster for that purpose.
Yeah,
Nope,
I also
Jake
think
Bauers.
Canha, I suspect, will also be the go-to Hoskins late inning replacement for defensive purposes too.
Yep, he is definitely the defense. We don't have another competent defensive
Exactly,
first baseman.
like that's it. There's nobody else there to do it.
Ernesto, but Ernesto is
Fine.
in AAA. And by the way, we're going to see Ernesto this year. Like, it's going to happen. It's just
They seem to really like him for sure.
I'm completely Ernesto pilled at this point. So.
Once we get past the Jake Bauers experience, we'll see Ernesto, I'm sure. Ryan, what's exactly the plan with Tyler Black? Because I'm not sure I have a good one. What do you do with him?
Nobody knows. Nobody. I don't think they know. They don't have a plan. Nobody knows. This is just. It's a tough situation all around. It really, really sucks because for Black, he's having his career put on hold by this. In an ideal world, he would have been moved to the outfield sometime last year, and they would have said, okay, you're an outfielder now. Go learn to play the outfield. This is what's going to happen. It just didn't make sense because it wasn't a path to playing time for them. But I wouldn't be surprised if they're reticent to trade him because they still probably believe that the bat could be average to solidly above average. And they don't want to trade that away and then have it come back and bite them in the ass like, oh, you let Tyler Black go, when they just didn't have a place that they could reasonably play him. So I feel like they're kind of stuck where they don't want to trade him, but now his trade value has taken a tumble from where it was, say, a year ago. So now they're kind of stuck with like a depreciated asset. I know it's a odd way to talk, it's an icky way to talk about baseball players, but it literally is. Like, that's the problem. His trade stock is down right now because of what last year was for him. So I think everybody's just in a bad situation with this, and the vibes around this are bad. God, did he look bad at first base last week when we saw him on TV? Like, it just was bad and ugly. And he did make that one play sprawling over the into the camera well, but then he absolutely butchered a very, from what I could see, a very scoopable ball at first base. He's just not he's not an infielder. He does not belong on the dirt. He belongs in the outfield, and we can't do that. It just doesn't make sense for us.
Nope.
So
too much.
It sucks for him. It sucks for them. It sucks for everybody. Just sucks.
We've got a Patreon question from Throbbing Yount, who actually put this in last week, but we'll get it into the hitting preview. Cooper Pratt, big leaguer this year. It'd be a lot of improvement in a hurry, Ryan. What do you think?
Yeah, it's too soon. You never count out the idea of a cup of coffee. We don't really do September call-ups that way anymore, but it
No.
also, I don't think they would do that because they hold their precious, their 40-man spots as precious. And so doing that going into the offseason, a lot of things would have to go really wrong for that to happen. Or Cooper Pratt would have had to have ascended to superstar status, which isn't impossible, but you just don't bet on that. I think Cooper Pratt is a 2026 thing, not a 2025 thing.
I agree with that.
Yeah, especially if he's making a jump to Double-A, the big test there, and not a great hitting environment in Biloxi either. So just keep that in mind when you look at box scores from him this year. All right, I was going to ask who else could be trade fodder in terms of prospects. Ryan, you seem to think Black is just in this stasis where he's not valuable enough to trade even, and the Brewers probably value him more. So I guess with that in mind, cross him off the list. Are there any other names you wouldn't be surprised to see traded away in a July deal, for example?
I mean, it sort of depends on where they're at and what the needs are and what other teams come knocking about. They've tended to trade from some of their second-tier international guys. They've been willing to do that. So,
Lara
yeah. Could be a guy. Quintana could be guys in that sort of vein could be guys. You wouldn't think they would trade the top guys. That's probably not going to happen. They really don't trade prospects out of their top 10 very much. So I would sort of be suspicious if I was another team and all of a sudden the Brewers came knocking about Tyler Black. I would be like, yeah, well, apparently you really don't think he's going to be anything, do you? But then again, if I was a team in a non-competitive situation, I would be looking to see what I could snake Tyler Black for, today. I'd just be like, oh yeah, go play in the outfield, kid. Let's see what you can do.
Yeah. Future Rocky Tyler Black. All right.
Oh boy. Yeah.
So in a Ryan McMahon deal, there you go. General Patreon questions. So not generally pertaining to specific players, but other ones just kind of about hitting. Ian Pomplin asking, spring training is underway. Are we seeing what we need to see from the players so far? So I guess, Ryan, what have some of your observations been in the games you've been able to catch?
Yeah, they're hitting the holy bejesus out of the baseball, almost up and down the roster.
It's Arizona, but yeah.
It is 100% Arizona, it is. But get a load of some of these, and these are the top guys. Oliver Dunn, 970 OPS. Jackson Chourio, 984. Garrett Mitchell, 1,032. Joey Ortiz, 1,119. Vinny Capra, 1,257. Sal Frelick, 1,007. You keep going down. William Contreras is over 1 in terms of OPS. Reese Hoskins, 1,649.
Oh yeah.
They are hitting the holy crap out of the baseball. Kind of up and down. Yelich has an OPS over 1,000. Yes, say what you want about Arizona. Say what you want about the fact that they are not facing the stiffest of competition. Say what you want about any of those things. But it's a hell of a lot better that they're hitting than they're not hitting. So I will take that as a positive and say, insofar as you can read anything into it, it's very, very little, but it's better than the alternative. So, yeah, I'll take that.
Next up, we have Tricky Henderson asking, between our two presumably full-time lefty hitters and Gold Dam Glovers, which do you see having a more productive offensive 2025, Terang or Salvatore? I love both of these dudes, but they're so 1980s. Can they surprise us this year? Oh, and as far as tuna sandwich microwave-related questions, you must have me confused with my cousin and former Spinal Tap drummer, Stinky Henderson.
Wow.
So, Paul, who do you expect more out of offensively this year between Terang and Sal?
I don't know. They're very similar. I guess I'll go Terang just because while I think regression is in store for him, he at least had a pretty decent offensive season last time. But they're like the same guy. Just flip a coin.
Yeah, I'm much more bullish on Sal's offense than I am on
Why?
Turang's offense. All the things we just talked about, there seems to be actual physical improvement there. We'll have to see if it is real and sustainable, but like he is actually hitting the ball harder than he was. That seems to be a real difference. And I thought there was more untapped potential there than there was with Turang in general, offensively. So
My problem with Sal is just let's just assume for the sake of argument he actually did put on 20 pounds of muscle. I think the fact that he had to do it, and what we learned about him last year, it's going to be hard to keep on weight and muscle playing a 102 game season. And so maybe he'll get off to a hot start with more of that, but I don't think he keeps it up unless he actually changes like approach stuff in addition. Maybe he has done that. But I will always take the between 2.7 to 4.7 WAR complete package that Turang was, having already established, versus the projection on Sal in right field that he's going to hit enough to generate that much value. This is an offensive question, but I don't know. Like we've already seen Turang at least speed and infield hit his way to a halfway decent offensive profile.
Yeah, total package, I still would maybe give Turang an edge just because that defense is so good. But obviously, Sal won a Gold Glove, and it wasn't like it was undeserved. He deserved that Gold Glove, too. So, like, yeah. But, yeah, Turang has definitely put up a higher number. He definitely is. He's the leader in the clubhouse right now. He's put up a better number than Sal ever has. So, from that perspective. But, yeah, he was asking offense, wasn't he? Yeah, he was.
It was offense specific.
It was
it was offense specific. So yeah, I would definitely take Sal to be the better offensive player. But I've always thought Sal was a better offensive player than Turang. Turang's value was that he was playing the defense up the middle and exceptionally well.
All right, last question this week before we wrap things up. Brian Polakowski asking, you still have superpowers, the same ones from last week where we picked, 5 different pitches for a super pitcher arsenal. So Brian's asking us this week to pick our ideal 5 tools from the current roster for a super player. So Paul, if you could Frankenstein your way into Paul's ideal baseball player, what do you got?
I will take. This is actually a little tricky on this team.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a good power bat to choose from, and so first of all, I want Yelich's eye, because Yelich manages to get himself on base even when he can't hit a lick, and you may end up wanting a lot of stuff from Yelich, which maybe makes this a more boring question than it otherwise. The other hard part of this is who's the fastest Brewer.
Mitchell, probably.
Who is it?
I think it's Mitchell.
You think
but
it's
he's
Mitchell?
not that great at stealing bases.
He's
That's
not
the
that great
weird,
at stealing
another
bases.
weird paradox with him. Yeah.
And
but he
there's
is,
so many
I
guys
think,
who
the
are
fastest
90
sprint
plus.
speed. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess I'd want his. How about we take his raw speed, and we'll take Turang's functional speed.
Yeah, that's fair.
Those are different things, right?
And
yeah.
Yelich's base running acumen. I don't know.
A lot of base running. 5 tools, right?
I know.
now.
Yeah, 5 tools and 4 of them are base running. I don't know. That's the Brewers.
It is, and then it would be nice to have some power. But who do you take? Do you just take Chourio because raw power is good on him? It'll get better, but I guess that. So you either take that guy or you take this Chourio, who is kind of that guy, because he also is very fast and steals bases at a clip and has all of that power, and also is good at getting on base. So the actual answer to the question might just be Jackson Chourio.
If we have superpowers, we're just making Jackson Chourio.
His percentage isn't quite there raw last year, but I think in the second half it was. So I guess it's Chourio with Yelich's eye. That's all I want.
Yeah, Mitchell might have a case. If you're going raw power, Mitchell, like, even going back to UCLA, people were like, he would hit balls 450 feet in batting practice. And we've seen him hit tanks in the major leagues, but obviously he hasn't put up the big power numbers because he hasn't put up big any numbers because he hasn't been healthy. So
Right.
that's a tricky one. But like that was always the thing that separated Mitchell and made him different than Terang and Frelick was that, oh no, he actually has, oh my God, power. It just was, we hadn't really seen it come into fruition.
And the UCLA
games.
swing and all that stuff too,
UCLA
right?
swing and all that.
Yep.
Yeah. I think, I'm between William and Chourio for power.
I could see that too.
Yelich and Frelick, Yelich is obviously our eye hitting guy, like that aspect of it. But yeah, William, I think could be that guy for power, but I feel like Chourio, like there's growth. I think he's like, a 60, 65 power hitter at his peak. It probably present would be Contreras, future would be Chourio. I'll go with that for power. Defense, boy, there's a lot to like, but just like the hands and footwork and all of that of Terang, give me that. In terms of just like the glove ability, speed, Mitchell is faster, but like Terang and Frelick, I think have better functional speed in terms of base running. So Paul's good on that part of it. What are we missing? Arm. Ortiz probably has the hose.
Yeah,
I think
probably
so.
Ortiz.
Probably.
Mitchell also has a hose. Mitchell also has a big time arm.
He does.
Outfielder arms is a little bit different. You're talking about something a little different. Sal is a hose too, honestly. Not a big guy, but he has a big arm as well.
He has bigger arms now.
Bigger arms now, yes.
All right. Thanks for the questions, everybody. Reminder, patreon.com/MKE Tailgate is where you can go to sign up for as little as $2 a month. That'll make sure you get your questions answered here every week on Milwaukee's Tailgate. Also giving a shout out to some new patrons, Ryan, who we may have collected over the last couple of weeks. I think we may have forgotten to do this last week. So who do we have?
So shouts to Aaron, who upgraded from free to ball and glove. Wizard of Loneliness, I think, also made that same transition, as did Crew Salad.
Awesome.
So all three
I think we
of
heard
you,
from
thank
Crew
you.
Salad last week. Yeah.
I think
awesome.
we did hear from
Thanks.
Crew Salad last week, yeah.
Thanks all for joining up. Even if you're not a patron, you can support us another way. Go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you're listening to this, and give us a 5-star review. And while you're there, be sure to hit the subscribe or follow button to make sure you never miss an episode. So that'll do it for this week. We were shooting for 90 minutes, and I think we beat it. We hit the under. So woo. Good job with a 4-page rundown here to get through. Thanks for sticking with us, everybody. If you missed our pitching preview, you can look for that in our archives. It'll be the episode right before this one, 371. When we get together next time, we'll put it all together. We'll take a look at the NL Central as a whole and Major League Baseball and make some predictions. That's always fun. So we will see you then. Until then, everybody, stay well. We'll see you next time here on Milwaukee's Tailgate.